Well, welcome those who are on the computer and those who are here in the coffee house. It's a beautiful, quaint environment. And so I'm always honored to be asked to speak on this topic. Thank you, Marilyn, for inviting me to do this. It's a very important topic overall. And so I'll tell you a little bit about our Healing Hearts Grief program to begin with. So we began in 1991, and we definitely were finding our way and creating new ground. There are very few Catholic-based grief support programs, even in the nation, let alone in this area. So we're quite unique, and it has expanded. I especially appreciate that it is Catholic-based, Christ-centered, and that's our focus, is to make this a tool of which we can use for our faith. We, as I said, began in 1991. We have a 6 weeks support system that we do in the spring and in the fall. So this year it's going to start on May 1st, and we have done live streaming. So I don't know how effective that is, because we do actually have interaction. We break up into groups and we share. We did have one lady that joined us Zoom. Don't know how valuable that was, but nonetheless, anyone is welcome to do that. So if you're interested, just talk to Marilyn and she'll forward you to us. So every year we do, in the spring, in the fall, 6 weeks program. And then we also have a Mass of the Holy Innocents that will be celebrated on December 28th. And we've been doing that for a number of years. It is for baby loss. And so for those who have lost a baby, can submit the name of their child and also attend the Mass. It is here in Lincoln at John the 23rd Chapel, which is where our offices are. We also have an outreach program where we will go out into parishes, train lay people to be support for those who are in need of grief support. And so I'm a layperson. I'm not a mental health professional. So I've received training. I have a therapist who gives of her time pro bono to our program. So we have that professional element. She is actually part of our 6 weeks grief program, but if I need her for anything in a professional way, I can connect with her, and she is always that support to us and gives that feedback that we need. I've been doing this work for about 30 years now, and I was just very, very young when I got started. So it really is an incredible experience for me. I get a lot of people saying that they're so grateful for the program, but I often say that I meet some of the best people in the most difficult circumstances. So we do a one-on-one support when necessary, more over for people who have had a loss of a baby, because that is such an immediate need. But we also work with people one-on-one for whatever loss there is. In our 6 weeks program, it doesn't matter what your loss is. It can be baby loss, spousal loss, parents, siblings. There are so many different forms of grief. And so that's what we're going to generally talk about tonight. I just want to give you an overview of what the program consists of. If you have questions or if you want to interject in any way, please interrupt me, because I think it's nice to have those questions and answers at the end of the talk, but you're likely going to forget what your point was. And so either chat in, and will I see that?
Yeah, it should show up on the side.
Okay, because I'm not a techie person, so you might have to help me along with that. If you have some sort of interjection, I don't know those people who are on live stream what your particular loss is, but I will make some general statements about all forms of grief. However, if there's something specific that you want to connect with, please just interject or raise your hand and I'll take whatever questions. So I do want to start really before we get into this with prayer. So if we could please do that. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord Jesus, we thank you for being here with us this evening. It is a cold evening, and you have drawn people to this talk, to come into the coffee house, and those who are live streaming. You know the hearts and the minds of those who are gathered with us this evening. We just call upon your mercy, sweet King of mercy. Show us your compassion, show us your wisdom, be here with us this evening. You know every soul that is present and hearing us. Just reach into the hearts of those who are most in need and provide us with your love and compassion. We ask these things in your name. Amen. Name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, so as we deal with grief during the holidays, it's probably a little bit more challenging. Grief is just overall challenging. Most of us have some sort of experiences with grief, and grief can come in so many different forms. So certainly we have those catastrophic events of the loss of a loved one significant to us in our lives. It could be, as I said, the different experiences that I mentioned, but can also be in different forms, job loss, friendship loss. Certainly the pandemic has created a whole new element of grief as we are not interacting with our family and our friends in the same way that we used to. Even when we do go to places, we're challenged with masks and mandates and people just being fearful about coming out into the world now. So that brings on a whole new challenge of grief as well. The support mechanisms that we have been accustomed to have changed greatly as we've been in the pandemic. So that in and of itself is another huge challenge. But when we're talking about the holidays, there's certainly this attitude that is framed around the holidays, Thanksgiving certainly, but more especially Christmas. So we're moving into this joyful, happy time. You know, so many people that will say, oh, I love the Christmas season. And for those of us who are grieving or dealing with challenges, we kind of can fall into that area of being Scrooge. You know, this is too tough for me to think about being joyful and happy. What do I have to be joyful and happy about? And of course, in our prayer life, we're constantly looking at trying to create that spirit of thankfulness, the spirit of recognizing the grace that Jesus puts in our lives. But there's always that overshadowing challenge that we deal with when we're grieving the loss of somebody who is very important to us. And so how do we reconcile that? Well, there's all these challenges that come to us. Family, friend gathering. There's the, thinking about preparing the food, having the dinner, the shopping, the wrapping, writing the Christmas cards, which I find to be so challenging when many of you have already been burdened with the writing the thank you notes from those who attended the funeral or gave memorials in honor of your loved one. It is an odd cultural norm that we have, I believe, in that people come to the funeral and we become a host or a hostess. And then thereafter, we're left with the burden of writing all these thank you notes for coming to the funeral or offering memorials. And it's an odd circumstance we're placed into because, often like if you have spousal loss, you're dealing with a whole new area of the unknown. Those things that you are left with to say, I don't know how to cook, or I don't know how to do the bills. I've got to do all of these requirements for Social Security or insurance purposes. There's so many challenges that come our way that we have no idea what we're doing. And then you're stuck in the midst of the holidays and you're expected to be cheerful and happy about them. And so it's a whole unique challenge. So there's a lot associated with this, that emotions that take it beyond even the grief aspect. So when we're grieving, we're in a fearful mode. We're very fearful of the unknown. We're very much isolated, especially in these pandemic times. And I think we definitely can deal with depression, even during the holiday time, but especially in these difficult challenges of grief. The family gatherings can be good or they can be difficult. Okay, so family, you think, are the ones that you turn to support you in your most difficult time of grief. But family can be your greatest challenge. It can be, because why is that? Okay, we go in different directions when we're grieving. So grief is a very personal, intimate experience. It is something unique to us, and it can come from what it is in our personality, what it is in our faith, and what it is that we have experienced in the past. So all of us have had some sort of grief experience. So our reaction to that can be based on those things: faith, personality, relationships. And so each of us, because of that, have a very unique form of grief, how we respond to it, how we react to it, what comforts us, what gives us, some sort of stability that gets us through this. Because essentially, supporting someone in grief means first validating those feelings. And every one of us have feelings that are unique to ourselves that we, of course, want to embrace and honor and validate. And it doesn't matter what those experiences are, they're yours. So you own them, you embrace them, they're yours to have. But some people in the family might look at it differently or see it differently. And especially as we're coming up to these celebrations that are coming with the holidays, everyone's going to see things differently. So as we come into this period of time, people will think that the best form of supporting you is to just ignore what it is that you're dealing with. Because if we're going into these happy, cheerful, joyful times, I can't bring up the pain that you're suffering. I can't deal with, the challenges that you're having, because those are sad times. And if I'm supporting you in that level of your grief, well, I might say or do something that's going to cause you to be emotional. But here's the reality of it. You're going to be emotional anyway. The pain is there. It very much is a part of you in the time of which you're in this grief. And so no amount of Christmas celebrations or ignoring the most difficult elephant in the room is going to take that away. And it actually can bring about isolation. It can bring about that fear of nobody seems to care what it is I'm going through. Nobody understands what it is I'm going through. And so the most important thing to do as someone to work with someone who is grieving is to first validate the pain, first validate the feelings that they're having, and then discover what it is that may help the situation, what it is that's going to support that person, not necessarily ignoring it, which is a common thing that we just do. We think if we just don't acknowledge what's happening, then that person will have an opportunity for joy in this festive time. The reality is that we need to acknowledge it. And those tears are going to be there whether we acknowledge it or not. And unfortunately, that's not a common thing that's known. So we need to definitely do that. I think the stress of the times can come about in certainly the time of which we're in. We're in a very divisive political time, along with the pandemic, along with some challenges that we're experiencing in the church. And so all those things surrounding us seems to be very tumultuous right now. So then you put the grief experience on top of that, and the stress almost seems overwhelming. So how do we prepare? Well, one of the ways that we can prepare for the holidays is a mental preparation. So we need to think about what is coming about and plan ahead for that. So perhaps even meditating on what do I expect? What are my expectations for the holidays? What do I want to experience for the holidays? Keeping in mind that when we are grieving, our concentration level is affected in a big way. So many of the things that we would normally focus on in our day-to-day life is significantly compromised when we're grieving. So we're not 100% of ourselves. Maybe you're only 50, 75% of yourself. So forgetfulness, loss of focus, everything in your life that is the norm is kind of turned upside down, because grieving takes a great deal of work, takes a great deal of energy. And so you're not going to be 100% yourself. So if you can express to family members what it is that is helpful to you, that is your best means of support. Because people who are surrounding you, they want to be a support for you. They just often don't know how to be. So if you can express that, however, having said that, you can't always know what is helpful, because we're just going in total different directions when we're grieving. But if you can identify, this is my coping mechanism, this is what helps me to deal with this, how am I going to get through this? Then that is the best case scenario for your family to support you. So be patient with yourself. And that is a huge part of supporting through the grief process. Sometimes making a list of what it is that are going to be your expectations and your priorities for the holiday seasons. And sometimes just being realistic to what are your expectations. And maybe they're low right now. If your grief is fresh, it can be that you're essentially saying, I don't even want to deal with this holiday crap. I don't want to deal with any of this stuff. Can it just all go away and everybody ignore it? But the reality is family will want to have some sort of level of holiday season, and they will want you to be a part of that. And so at what level you want to do that, cutting back is okay. Saying, I don't want to celebrate at the same level that I normally would celebrate is okay to do. We sometimes think that we have to have this Norman Rockwell kind of Christmas where the tree is perfect, the food is perfect, the holiday is perfect, the gifts are perfect, everybody is just coming together and loving each other and everything's good. But the reality of family is, when do we see that in a normal way? Well, family dynamics brings challenge. And so relationships bring challenge. And sometimes it's just not always that coming together in that loving, supportive way because of personalities or challenges we have with our expectations or our thoughts of how things should be on a normal level, let alone on the Christmas side of things. So certainly that lost enthusiasm is normal. The lost enthusiasm for wanting to do things for the holidays can be a very normal reaction to things. So I think when we move into the chores of holiday, we need to think about how are we going to do that. And so memories are a good thing. Memories can bring about tears. They can bring about emotions, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing. So as we're unpacking the Christmas decorations, or as we're deciding what we want to do we want to put a tree up? Do we want to buy presents and wrap those presents? Whatever it is that we have for the experience. If tears are shed, that's not a bad thing, because memories are important to the holiday. And tears aren't necessarily sad tears. Sometimes they can be tears of joy for this person we had in our life and the impact they had in our life. Because that person being in our life, we made us who we are today. And had we not had that person in our life, we wouldn't have had the joys and the challenges and the sorrows and all the things that we've experienced over the years to create who it is that we are today. So tears can be definitely a natural reaction and a good thing. So I think the important thing to remember is keeping your expectations realistic. So having a plan. So an example would be, if you're going to go to someone's home and celebrate the holiday, perhaps having a communication with the person who is hosting the event first. I'm going to try to come today, or I'm going to try to be there at your house for this holiday experience, but I don't know how this is going to work for me. I'll do the best I can, but if you see me needing to leave, then please don't be offended by that. Have an escape plan. If you're going to go to an event, say even going to Mass for Christmas Mass, and you're fearful that you're going to be emotional for that experience, have someone go with you. Maybe sit in the back of the church so that if you get to a point where the emotions are too overwhelming, you have an escape plan. And you just say, I can't do this. And it's okay to say, I can't do this. And so you're just going to leave. And you're going to say, I'm going to do the best I can. And here's the thing, Jesus knows our heart. He knows it, what we want to do and what we can do. And so if you back away and say, this isn't for me, I can't accomplish this, it's okay. It's fine to say, I can only do certain things. And there's some things I will not be able to do. So have that escape plan, or have someone with the Christmas experience in the room that is your confidant. So that person who is going to be supportive of you, so that you can turn to them. Maybe you can have a signal, or maybe you can just come up and quietly say, I need this, or I need that. I need somebody to acknowledge the elephant in the room, that my loved one has died and everybody's ignoring what it is I'm going through. There's that expectation, as I said, of the joyful experience, that no one wants to acknowledge what they will perceive to be the sad element in the room. So by not saying anything at all, essentially you're just making that person who has the loss feel terribly isolated. So it is better to acknowledge it and to ask, what can I do for you to make this experience a little easier for you? Something that's going to get you through the day, something that's going to comfort you and help you to feel a part of the experience. It doesn't mean that everybody has to sit around the table feeling sad and crying. It could just simply mean we acknowledge this person. And maybe you can acknowledge them in certain ways. Maybe you light a candle in the room, and that candle is lit for that person who can't be with us. Some people will even have a table setting for that person who would have sat there that is no longer with us, so that there's an acknowledgement of that person. Maybe sending flowers or a plant, a Christmas plant of some way, that acknowledges that this person should be with us and is not. Something that tells us that we can honor this person and honor the person who is grieving. So could be you don't want to participate in the festivities at all. And there's going to be a family stressor that says to you, you've got to acknowledge Christmas. In the end, you have to do what works for you. And if it is that you don't want to acknowledge Christmas, for those of us on the outside that are saying, oh, please, can't you just try? In the end, you have to do what works for you. And that's true of grief in general. Whenever you're grieving, whatever your issues are, you have to do what works best for you, even if it looks like it's not the norm to everybody else, or it looks like it makes someone feel uncomfortable. In the end, it's got to be about what you need to do, because this is your personal experience and you have to grieve in the way that works best for you. Maybe you need to change traditions of Christmas and look at doing something altogether different. Some people I've had in my group will literally just go take a trip. Either they might do it by themselves, or they take a close friend or a loved one with them and they go somewhere completely different and don't even do the traditional Christmas experience. And that's okay if that's what it is that you need to do in order to get through things. You may need to negotiate with family members and say, this is what's going to work best for me. This is what I need in order to participate in this. Their ideas might be very different than yours. And that's where you have to negotiate. Relationships are difficult on a normal basis. And then when we're grieving, that's where we need to ratchet it up and be supportive of each other in a much different, passionate way. And that can be hard to do, but give it a try. So if you're a parent and you've lost your spouse or you've lost a child, it's very challenging. We had some people in our group this last session that lost adult children, but yet they still have little ones at home. And so it's very challenging for them, because while they're wanting to provide the normal Christmas experience for their children, they're grieving so terribly, they can't imagine getting through this holiday season with the experiences of their children lost. I mean, these are young people that have died, and yet they still have to create some sort of normal Christmas experience for the other children. Sometimes we have to get outside of ourselves, especially as we're grieving, in order to support others. And that's a perfect example of that. These families that have had their young people die, and yet their younger children yet at home. Sometimes it's good for us to get outside of ourselves and find a different experience that's going to get us through this. Maybe that's going and serving Christmas dinner at the People's City Mission, or doing something altogether different that we didn't even think of doing for somebody else. Maybe inviting somebody that has no one at Christmas to come into your home and share dinner with you. Be creative and think of ways that perhaps could be that getting outside of yourself and thinking of somebody else. Maybe it's, okay, my spouse has died, and normally I would be buying Christmas presents for them, and I can't do that this year because they're no longer with us. Well, maybe you go out and buy something that you think would have been a present that your loved one would have appreciated, and then you donate that. Most of our churches have Advent trees right now with little tags on them. You can pull a tag and let that be a gift that you buy in honor of your loved one that has passed away. So there are some creative things that we can do. Hanging a stocking in memory of your loved one. Ornaments are really very nice to do. You can do all kinds of different ornaments. Some that I've had some support people in the past have created these ornaments that you can have engraved with the person's name and the date on it. You can come up with a Christmas wreath and either have it at your own home, or you could take it to the gravesite, something that has an acknowledgement. And, just being patient with yourself and identifying what are the things that would be helpful for you and being creative. And if you don't know, ask. I know the people that are live streaming don't have the benefit, but perhaps I can download some of these documents if someone's interested and make them available to live stream people. So there are some handouts here that will give you some creative ideas that are helpful in celebrating Christmas and honoring your loved one. Does anybody have any questions or input that they want to give at this point? Don't want to just kind of ramble on if you have thoughts. I don't see anything on chat. So am I hitting the mark? Is there something that you want me to hit on that I'm not hitting on yet? Okay, we're good. All right, let's go on. Okay, so loneliness can be certainly a terrible issue for those of us who are grieving. You can be in a crowd of people and still feel lonely. You can have all this interaction around you and still feel isolated, like something's off, because that person that should be with you is not with you. And so how does one deal with that? Well, it's a longing that you have for this person who is no longer with us. And so most people just simply need to talk about it. And so you find those support people that are willing to listen to you. And sometimes you're going to tell the same story over and over again. And if we do repeat ourselves and say that same story over and over again, that is very normal. It is our minds, our hearts processing the grief. And so as we process that grief, we tell the same stories. We talk about the same issues that we're dealing with. That's how we work through grief. We keep telling the same things that are bothering us, the same things that are an issue with us. And the more that we tell it, the more that we process it and we find a way to cope. Because basically, grief experiences are better met with finding those coping mechanisms that support us through it. So, talking about your loved one, needing that opportunity to share stories and what your feelings might be are very important. However, there's that challenge of the gender differences in grief. So culturally, our world tells us that women will be more talkative and more expressive of their grief, and men will be less inclined to share because you have been taught to be a man, to stand up and take the hard knocks, right? And be tough. But resist that if you can. I know that is so difficult. We have seen more men in our 6-week sessions in the last few years than ever. And when they come to our group, they are very expressive. They can be very emotional. And we say, that's great. Don't be inhibited about sharing your tears or your emotion, because those are the ways that we express our grief is through our emotions. But unfortunately, culturally, we don't give men that break. So women are over here expected to be emotional and express it. And they're more likely to seek out professional help when that's necessary, or support systems when that's necessary. Men, on the other hand, are supposed to be the rock, holding up the family and doing all the mechanical things that make the family strong. And somehow they're supposed to hold in what it is that they're emotionally feeling. So if we can break those norms and give permission to men, for men to grieve, essentially we need to give permission for anyone to grieve. You need to give yourself permission to grieve, especially in a time of holiday where we're supposed to be thinking about the cheerful, joyful side of things. No, give yourself permission to feel these emotions. It's important that we go through these. Grief is a normal expectation that we all must experience when we have a loss. So if we don't experience that normal process of grief, it will just sit and wait for us until we do. So hence why we sometimes see people having mental health issues that haven't dealt with it. It's why we see women who are post-aborted deal with grief in a very difficult way, have mental health issues. If you look at the statistics of women who are post-abortive, they're more likely to have depression and even suicidal thoughts, because we as a culture don't give them the permission to feel the grief of the loss of the baby that they've just had to go through this experience. So, we need to recognize it and acknowledge it in our culture that is a true loss. And then once that loss is realized, then the process of going through the grief can begin, and we can find a way to cope with that. So remember that the people that are around you that are not bringing up the grief experiences are not, they're not trying to be cruel or inattentive to you. Most people will think that is the better way to react to the situation, because they acknowledging it might bring an emotion about in you that makes everyone uncomfortable, makes them uncomfortable, makes everyone in the room uncomfortable if you're emotional. And so we try to do a much better job at teaching people, how do you support someone who's grieving? So I have a flyer here. If you know somebody that you can hand this flyer off to, or if you are a support person like you are, Jim, take one of these flyers and it will say to you, here's what you can do to help support somebody who's grieving. And there's also one that says, here's what you don't do. Don't try to find the cliches or the easy pat on the back kind of answers, like at least she isn't suffering anymore. Or, well, can't you have more babies? You'll be able to get pregnant again. All of those are cliches that are hurtful. And as I hear those kinds of things, sometimes when we're in the grief sessions, or even if I've heard them myself personally, as I've had losses of my babies, I've had my brother die of suicide, people will come up with the most insane things to say, thinking that they're comforting you. And so what I will typically say is, well, you would think that maybe that would be a comfort measure, but in fact, this is what's more helpful. And if you can identify what's more helpful, then give the people around you that opportunity to know that, because there's all kinds of educational moments that can come about. There's all kinds of opportunity for you to educate and tell people what is that support, not only for you in this current situation, but what might be helpful to someone who they may encounter in the future that is in a grief experience. Here's what is helpful. And most times people who are saying inappropriate things are doing inappropriately, or maybe not doing anything at all. The person that you would have expected would have been at the funeral and they didn't attend, or you didn't get a call or a card or any sort of acknowledgement at all, can be very hurtful. Well, why is that? Well, it could be that they have an issue with the death experience, or they simply just feel inadequate, not knowing how to support and care for someone who's grieving. And they're fearful that they're going to say the wrong thing, so they say nothing at all. It's not that they're being cruel or inattentive to you. They just don't know what to do. So we try to educate as best we can to tell people how to be a support system to those who are grieving. You don't have to have the right thing to say. There really isn't the right thing to say. Most people will say that the best form of support is when someone says to them, I can't believe what you're going through. This has to be so difficult. I just don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. And because there is nothing to say. It's not like you're going to be walking into the reception at the funeral after the funeral, and you're going to say something so profound that that person is going to go, that's all I needed to hear. I'm all healed. I'm well now. And it just doesn't work that way, obviously. We don't have the answers. And sometimes it's okay to say, we don't know. And that can be so difficult for people who are grieving because many people will have that why. I'll never forget this gentleman that was in our 6-week group, and his wife, he was elderly, and he and his wife had been married many years. And he would every week come and say, why? I don't understand why. And he left with saying, why? We never resolved the issue of why, because there are no answers sometimes to the why. And yet he kept searching for that answer and just couldn't find peace until he had the answer for why. Why did she, she was outside in the yard, just doing her gardening that she loved, and she simply collapsed and died. So there was no knowledge that she was going to die. She wasn't sick to anyone's knowledge. There was absolutely no preparation for this. And so for this poor gentleman, he just couldn't find the answer to why. Well, there isn't always an answer to the why. Sometimes you can search and search the different aspects of how this person died and never know for certain. And I think if you do know, it's still going to be, well, then why did they have this ailment? Why did this have to come about? Like I went through that when I experienced the loss of my babies, and I would make it to the second trimester of my pregnancy. And for some unknown reason, their heart would just stop beating. And so then I would have to go through a delivery process, and they would be born, and they were fine. There were no notable physical signs of why they would die. So I'd go through this, why? I don't understand. How can this be? I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. Is there something I'm doing wrong? We never knew. We never found out why. Went on to adopt 2 children. And we have the 2 birth children, went on to adopt 2 more children. I got pregnant again with the 5th child. And I'm like, oh, this is going to not land well. I hadn't had a live birth for so many years. Yet he survived. Why did he survive and the others did not? Don't know. I mean, I won't know that until I stand before our Lord one day and I get to be with those children again and I get to see them again. Maybe I'll know then, but I think I won't care because it won't matter at that point. I'll just be with them again. And that's what's most important. But we all work as parents to get our kids to heaven. I know my kids are in heaven. And I look forward to one day that opportunity to see them. And it's hurtful. Sometimes it's hard, especially when I look at my birth children and I say, would they look like that? I have 3 birth children. They're all redheads. Are those little ones redheads? Yeah, I know what sex they are, but what would their personalities be like? A significant part of our grief process can surround the things that we will never know, never experience, the things that should be where that person is present, the weddings that are going to come about, the holidays, all of the experiences, the anniversaries, the birthdays. That's where it gets very difficult, is that we're moving toward those experiences with that person that we love has always been there to experience those things with us. And now we have to grieve the things that will never be. The things that should be, that we thought would be there, that are not going to be any longer because that person isn't with us. And so that there's many different elements to grief that can make this so complicated. So moving on. How are we going to get through with some of the things that are going to come before us for invitations, family events, somebody asking us even to dinner? What's our reaction to that? Sometimes you're not going to want to feel like you want to say yes, but I encourage you to try to say yes and try to have that experience. obviously knowing what your limitations might be, but at least giving it a try. If someone's inviting you to go to dinner, try. You might go and actually feel that experience is good. Might be that this person gives you an opportunity to share some of the grief experiences that you're dealing with. It could be, that person has shared experiences that once you communicate together, that's a comfort level for you. Could be you find in the end, you have no one to share with and no one that fully understands. So what do? Certainly, we would always say prayer is the number one place we turn. And sometimes that seems like, the easiest answer to just say prayer. But if you still find that you need to communicate and you don't have a way to share with someone, try thinking about journaling. Try thinking about writing down what it is that you're experiencing. Sometimes it's just a matter of getting those emotions out and putting them down. If it's there's huge benefit to journaling. So if it is that you have just a little notebook that you can write your ideas down, it doesn't have to be anything special. It's just writing that thought down. So you're getting that out and you're expressing it, which is a good and healthy thing to do. But it's also a nice mechanism for tracking where you're at. When you're grieving, you can often feel disillusioned. You can feel like I'm not making any progress. I'm in no better place. And sometimes journaling gives you that mechanism to see I am getting better. Grief is a very roller coaster effect. So when we're grieving, we can feel disillusioned. And then maybe as we keep with it, we're kind of climbing that ladder and we're thinking, I'm doing better. And then without sometimes any warning, we just crash. You say, I'm not making any progress at all. This is so discouraging. I feel overwhelmed. I just can't get through this on my own. And then your journaling gives you that ability to see where you're at today and where you're going and how far you've come. So it's just, I'm a big fan of journaling. I did that religiously when I was going through my losses. And I can look back now and not only see the progress I made, but actually read things that I wrote. And I would write after Mass. I would go to Mass and then I would write after Mass and I reread some of those things and I go, whoa, I don't think I write that good. I'm saying things that are not in my vocabulary, that are things I wouldn't normally express. And I'm thinking the Holy Spirit's with you. I mean, what an absolute gift that we're given when we just simply call upon God to get us through this, seeking his mercy, saying, give me the tools I need to get through this. I would just read, I still have those books today. And sometimes I love to go back to them and just read them because it reminds me of how Jesus was walking through me or walking with me through this most difficult time. And he is there with you. So, in time, you're going to be able to see progress as you do the work. But grief is work. And you will never be the same person again. You will always be a changed person because of this grief experience. But you can find ways that will give you coping skills. And then, as I said, getting outside of yourself and sometimes putting yourself with other people will not only give you fulfillment, but it will give others your experience to mirror off of. And hopefully you're providing comfort and care to people as you get better. So 30 years ago, when I was hurting so terribly after losing my babies, and there was no support system whatsoever in the church, and a lot of my issues were surrounding my faith, I thought, how is this that we don't have any supportive mechanism in the church? I mean, isn't this where we should be receiving support, is from the church? And it's really kind of a cop-out, I think, to rely solely on the priests for that. Matter of fact, the priests, my son is a priest, And so when he was going through the priesthood, I said, do y'all get counseling skills? I mean, does somebody tell you how to support somebody who's grieving, or work with couples who are in marriage strife, or they don't? He says, there's not time for that. There is so much theology we need to learn that we get very little of that in the seminary. So it's unfair, I think, to put that on our priests, to assume that our priests are going to do that. Certainly, they're godly men and they can offer us care and comfort as we're going through the funeral process and maybe even thereafter, but they simply don't have the time or the skills to do what is necessary for those of us who are grieving. And it makes perfect sense that the church would support that system. So that's when we came up with Healing Hearts. And it didn't come off easy. There were a lot of priests that I approached in different areas, of which, I said, we need to do this. And, oh yeah, we do. And then I got nowhere. So then I follow up a few weeks later and said, what do you think about it? Yeah, you're right. Yep. And, they've got a lot on their plate. And everybody just kept putting me off until finally I nagged enough that I came across one priest that said, yes, let's do this. And so they assigned us a therapist and a priest and myself. And from my experiences, work I did prior was in quality assurance and program development. And then the therapist brought, the professional aspect of it. The priest, of course, oversaw the program. We were able to offer that support that people are looking for. And it's a Christ-centered Catholic program that when our people go through it, and I'm not singing the praises of it, it's the people who make it successful. When people come into a room for our grief program that first evening, I prayed that the Lord brings those people together that he intends to be together. And then that we are provided the opportunity to know what tools we need to help each person in the room. And sometimes we miss the mark. Sometimes people leave our group and don't get the full benefit of it, but most people do. And I say it's not necessarily a program, it's the people in the room supporting each other. That's what makes this program so successful. It's everybody supporting each other and being there for one another. And then as soon as you get, first night, we talk about Grief 101, similar to some of the things I've been talking about tonight. And then we start breaking up into groups, sometimes depending upon the size of the group, or we stay as a whole and everybody talks about the issues. And it's like everybody bouncing off of each other, everybody helping each other. And I'm there as the coordinator of the program to kind of oversee the discussion. And our therapist is there from a professional perspective, which is very valuable. But it's each other in the room supporting one another. Because I guarantee you, when you've had a grief experience, it has changed your world to a level where you will never want anyone to suffer alone, where you have gained a new and deep compassion for someone who is grieving, so that you'll want to help each other. You won't want anybody to suffer in pain by themselves. So then you become that compassionate source to one another. That's what helps it to work. So if you can find that mechanism of, sometimes, and it's tough, because when you're wanting to be with someone who is supporting you in grief, you need to have the validation for what your personal experiences are, not necessarily hear, oh, well, Susie Q, had that same thing. And then you start hearing the story of somebody you don't even know about the death experience. That's not helpful. It's not helpful. No, I need to be able to express to you what I'm feeling, what my emotions are. And that's what true support is. So that's what we try to do with one another. But I see the mechanism that happens in the room with, Mary over here who's lost her husband, and Martha over here who also lost her husband, and they have similarities that they can share with each other and support. We've even had some people in our group that have remained friends and do things socially together. I won two ladies, this one group of ladies, that they even travel together now, and they met in our group. So, I think we can find commonality when we're going through a grief process. And I think definitely people in our group do that. So. Any questions, thoughts?
Is there
Done.
information on healing heart?
I have that. Our next session, as I said, begins on March 1st, and it's 6 weeks. It's on Tuesday evening from 7 to 9 at John the 23rd Diocesan Center. And we, like I said, have a professional therapist as well as myself and a priest that oversees the program as well. And our group usually forms anywhere from 8 to 12 people. However, my last session, I had 20 people, along with a gal that live streamed too. So, as I said, I don't know, the lady that live streamed, I think it was difficult for her to do. And so I would love to try live streaming again. So if anybody on your live stream is interested, we can certainly try it again and see. It was difficult for her because she was challenged, with technical difficulties, as well as she would get very tired because she was an older woman.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure how the live stream would work, but I'd certainly give it a try and see if that would be valuable. But anywhere from, like I said, 8 to 12 people is what's normal. So, any other thoughts? Yeah, Marilyn.
I was wondering if you have any suggestions of like how to open those conversations, but also like respect that maybe people don't want to talk about a loss,
Yeah.
don't want to talk about a grief, or they're like embarrassed about their emotional reaction.
Sure.
Like, what are kinds of things that you might say to like open that
Like an
conversation?
open-ended,
Yeah.
open-ended question. Well, you have to really be noticing the person's reaction, because you can say, "How are you doing?" And that could sound like a greeting. And that person may say, "Yeah, I'm okay." Or they may say, "I'm hanging in there," or just those common phrases that one will say. When you're a griever, when you're in bereavement, you have to establish some sense of trust before you're going to be able to share what your emotions are. And there isn't necessarily a recipe for what that trust is going to be. Sometimes it's just a gut feeling. Like when I lost my babies, I worked in a very large hospital, and there would be some people who would approach me, and I would just have a natural inclination that I didn't want to tell them anything. No particular reason why. I mean, they weren't terrible people. I just didn't feel safe. And then I would find somebody else who would ask me, "Truly, how are you doing?" And sometimes I would say, "Do you really want to know?" And they would say, "Yes." So it's the sincerity that you bring across. I think that really matters. Are you just saying, "How are you today?" Are you saying, "I'm really concerned for what you're going through"? Do you need to talk? I mean, I don't have the answers, but I surely care about what you're going through. My very close friend right now is having mental health issues, and she's going into surgery tomorrow. So when I talked to her today, she said, "My anxiety is off the charts. I'm so scared." And so the number one reason I always say, it doesn't matter what the issues are, and certainly grief is the best scenario to use this method, is validate the feeling. Whatever the feeling is, validate it. It may even say, don't say ever, "Oh, you shouldn't feel that way." Or, "I don't understand why you feel that way." Validate the feeling, paraphrase what they say. I think having a genuine heart is what's most important, is that you really have a genuine desire to want to hear what it is they're feeling. And then if they don't acknowledge that, or if they don't interact with you, don't take it personally. Just sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes they don't feel safe to want to express, because grief is such a personal, intimate experience. And maybe they don't feel like, well, either they may not be in the phase where they can express right now, or they just don't feel comfortable talking about it. But don't stop trying, because maybe the next time you encounter them, they will feel safe, or they will feel like they need to talk. It doesn't have to be anything sophisticated. It could just simply be, "I'm really concerned." And that's why I said to my friend today, "I'm so concerned for you. Tell me, what are you fearful of? What is giving you anxiety?" And then she began to talk about, I don't have answers for her. I don't have an ability to say, other than these doctors are professionals, this is what they do every day. You should feel a sense of confidence that they're going to treat you well, they're going to do a good job because this is their job. But none of that, she knows all that. She knows all that. That's just normal things that we would think about. But whatever her anxiety is there. So I let her talk for a little bit. And I had to have surgery a few years back. And I said, I think what you're experiencing is very normal. I said, when I was in the pre-op room and I was waiting, and of course they were behind schedule. So the wait was even greater. I sat and cried. I was so anxious that they asked me if I wanted a sedative. And, I don't have mental health issues, I don't think. And so sometimes letting people just express what they're feeling and then validating what it is that they're feeling can help. It doesn't take it away, but it can help. And so by the time we were done with our conversation, I said, I will pray for you. I ended it with God be with you tomorrow. And, tell me about what time you're going into surgery. She's going to go in about 1. And I said, I will absolutely stop what I'm doing at that time and spend some time praying for you, praying a chaplet or something. And that's all we can do. We don't have the answers and we're not expected to. Actually, if you try to find the answers, it's lame. Don't even try. It's lame. It's like, I guarantee you, whatever answers you think you might have, they're not going to help. You just need to let people express their emotions and validate, paraphrase what it is they're saying. And that in itself will be a huge support. Anything else? And I don't see anything on chat. So either it doesn't work or nobody has a question. Yes, back here.
Well, what do you do if someone does expect you to have the answers, like the guy who was asking why over and over and over, and he's just searching for that answer, and someone expects someone to have an answer, and you just tell them, like, I wish I had an answer for you.
Yeah.
But
that's really all you can do. I mean, there are times, like, for instance, when I went through the loss of my babies with no explanation and why, I was working for a hospital. I would sit during my lunch hour in the medical library, and I would just read books over and over and over, trying to find the solution. Why it was, because my situation was very unique. And there were things that were happening that shouldn't happen. And so it didn't make sense. And the doctors didn't pay attention to it. They didn't really seem to care, because there's kind of this thought, well, until you've lost 3 babies, then we really don't make a huge issue of it. And which is crazy, because you really got to go through this 3 times to have somebody pay attention. So, but, I just kept searching and reading and trying to find the solutions on my own, because I had a medical background, limited, albeit, but, wanting to find, and the answers never did come. And I think the more that people are processing what it is they're going through, likely they will resolve those issues in time and come to acceptance. It's like you bargain things, and then after a while you have to come to an acceptance. Sometimes people don't. And if that is the case, like in this situation with this gentleman that I described, sometimes we recommend professional help. That's one of the benefits that I have to having a therapist in our program, but also too, my 30 years experience will tell me when someone is beyond the help that we can provide in our ministry, because this is not counseling, this is a ministry, it's a support system. And so we're not there to provide professional counseling. Now, my therapist will sometimes interact with people, even especially after we're done with our session. She'll interact with them on a more professional way, but for the most part, this is just a ministry. And so sometimes we have to say, you might benefit from going to a counselor and just talking some of those things through. It doesn't mean you're off or you're not stable. It just means that you have deeper questions that you need to keep searching. So, anything else? Oh, I think there's a question here. Oh no. What about friends who deal with infertility? Oh yeah. Infertility is a very challenging experience. especially as we're going into the holidays, again, it's that elephant in the room where we know that maybe they're trying to get pregnant, and yet people will say stupid things like, so, are we pregnant yet? Or what's the plan on that? Or are we looking at adoption? Or, again, saying the inappropriate things that really are none of your business. And then there's that couple, that they're trying so hard and they don't understand. Again, it's the whys. It's like the loss that one feels, even though there isn't a death. It's a huge loss because it doesn't make sense to us. We see scripture that says, be faithful, be fruitful and multiply. And you see everybody else around you having that experience, and yet you don't get that experience and you don't understand what to do about it. So it's a very challenging thing. I think, again, we just need to tap in to where that friend is, where those couples are, and find out what are their issues and what it is that we need to do to support them and where they're at. There's a multitude of issues that surround an infertility couple. They want to be happy for their friends who are having children, yet they feel that terrible loss for themselves that they'll never arrive there. They want to maybe look at adoption, but they're still holding out thinking, but I want to have my own child. It's complicated. So I think what you best need to do is identify where that person is or where that couple is on whatever their issues are, and validate whatever it is that they're going through. It's the same thing, the same method that you would use in any grief experience, is just finding out where they're at and understanding that, inquisitive nature is, maybe something that you'd worry about a job or, about something that's going on otherwise in your life, but you don't need to necessarily talk to them about every detail of what's coming about. They're going to share with you what they want to share about the situation. And the more that you try to query them and get into very personal territory, it could be all the more difficult. If they want to share, they're going to share. You just need to, again, be genuine and open to letting them share if they need to. So, and there's one last question on here. See, does the same work when you talk to someone who has a disease with poor prognosis? Oh, yeah. So I have firsthand knowledge of that because my husband suffers Parkinson's disease. And that's been something that we've been dealing with for the last almost 2 years. And it's degrading pretty quickly. And so how do you deal with someone who is in that place where they're sick, don't know where they're at? So you've just got to, again, you've got to put them in a place where they feel comfortable talking about it, where they feel like they want to talk about it. In some cases, they're not accepting yet of what disease they have and what their prognosis is going to be. My best friend died last year of cancer. And so when I would talk to her, not having the experience of dealing with anyone who'd ever had cancer, I would sometimes say things to her and she would literally say to me, oh, that's not helpful. Don't say that. And, that was her personality. And so I would just say to her, I'm sorry if I ever say anything that offends you, because I love you so much. All I want to do is help you through this. I want to be a support for you. And I'm going to say and do things sometimes that are maybe not helpful because I don't know what I'm doing. So it's best if you just tell me that was something stupid, what you just said. So you just be honest with them and be genuine. I think, that's the recipe for all things. Have a genuine nature that where you really are caring for that person. And I would say, tell me what you need. Tell me what I need to do to support you. What are the things that are going to help you get through this? And really, it was just the same thing that we do when people are grieving. It was letting her talk. She would go endlessly on and on about her treatment and the trial that she was in and all the details surrounding that. And most of which I couldn't even understand. And sometimes I'd ask questions and other times I would just let her talk because she needed to download all that. And then I would just, give her supportive comments, how much I love you, how much I need you. I care so much about what you're going through. I know how difficult this must be. I know how hard this must be on your family, just validating a lot of the experiences that she was going through. And then being, with her especially, I could be just honest. Like when I would go see her the last few weeks that she was dying, and being a vocalist, she'd say, okay, we need to talk about the funeral and what you're going to sing. Like, wow, this is really, and then the next time I come, okay, you got the funeral plans down. Now, what are we going to do for the music again? Let's go through this one more time. And I think what an odd circumstance that when I would come, she'd want to talk about the plans of the funeral, but that was her thing. And so I, by all means, embrace that. And we go through the music again. Talk, no, you don't need to worry about paying the organist. The funeral home takes care of that. Okay. Those were her issues. And we just embraced them and let her express them because she was a planner. She liked to do the details. So I think that's all for the questions. So we're probably done. Thank you, everyone who's online. Thank you for coming this evening. And I'll stick around, but please take advantage of some of these flyers. And like I said, if anybody on the live stream has specific needs, just let Marilyn know and I can download any document and get it sent off to you. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks again, everyone, for coming. And I'm planning to, God and technology willing, have this talk uploaded. So I'll send it out to everybody if there are people you want to share it with or whatever. I feel like it's such a fantastic resource for anyone, whether you've suffered a loss or not, to just have these resources out there. So hopefully I will have the talk downloaded and then I'll be able to send you guys out a YouTube link. So thank you guys for joining us online in person. And yeah, thanks again to Sandy as well.
You bet.